keeping you waiting. We were playing with elevators. Long story. At any rate, good evening. I believe we've had a series of very productive meetings in the past few days, and I'm looking forward to continuing to make progress on critical global issues as we head off to Glasgow. Because of what we've seen again here in Rome, what I think is the power of America showing up and working with our allies and partners to make progress on issues that matter to all of us. And there's really no substitute for face-to-face discussions and negotiations among the leaders when it comes to building understanding and cooperation. I found in all of my meetings here, both the larger sessions and the one-on-one sessions, and I had many of those, a real eagerness among our partners and allies for American leadership to help bring the world together and solve some of these big problems. I found my one-on-one engagements with so many of the leaders and the importance of strong personal relationships never ceases to amaze me when you're looking at someone straight in the eye when you're trying to get something done. They know me, I know them, we can get things done together. And so I want to thank the Italian people, by the way, for the G20, for their hospitality, and congratulate Prime Minister Draghi. He did one heck of a job leading the G20 through a difficult year marked by great global challenges, critically among them ending the pandemic, driving a broad-based, sustainable global economic recovery, and tackling the climate crisis. I believe we made tangible progress on each of these issues, in part because of the commitment that the United States has brought to the table. For example, I'm proud that the G20 endorsed the global minimum tax. This is something the United States has been driving for over a year, building momentum up to this achievement. And this is an incredible win for all our countries. Instead of nations competing against one another to attract investments by bottoming out corporate tax rates, this set a minimum floor of 15% to ensure that giant corporations begin to pay their fair share no matter where they're headquartered, instead of hiding profits overseas. We also agreed to establish a fund in the future that for countries can draw on to help prevent, if necessary, and respond to the next pandemic, prepared for the next time around. Yesterday, together with Prime Minister Johnson and Merkel and Macron, President Macron, we came together to reiterate our shared belief that diplomacy is the best way to prevent Iran from gaining a nuclear weapon, and we discussed how best to encourage Iran to resume serious good faith negotiations. And I also want to note that even as I've been here in Rome, as you might guess, and some of you I suspect doing the same thing, American reporters, been focused on the vital issues that affect American workers and families at home. I just finished meeting with a broad coalition of partners on how to address the immediate supply chain backlogs and that the world's been dealing with and facing, and we're facing back at home, and how to make sure we have access to all the products we need, from shoes to furniture to electronics to automobiles, to make sure that we talk about how better to secure ourselves against these future shocks, whether pandemic, climate change, or other disasters. And the Build Back Better framework, which is, God willing, going to be voted on as early as sometime this coming week, that I announced on Thursday, includes, for the first time ever, several billion dollars to help strengthen the supply chains to make sure we have access to everything we need. And it's going to give workers and folks making all these products just a little bit of breathing room. The Build Back Better will also going to make it easier for them to afford everything from child care while they are at work for their kids, 2 years of free high-quality preschool. And finally, today I was proud to announce, together with our close EU partners, another critical win for both American workers and the climate agenda. The United States and the European Union have agreed to negotiate the world's first trade agreement based on how much carbon is in a product, as we negotiated the steel and aluminum tariffs that were in place. We made agreement, and I might add, strong support of the U.S. steelworkers back home, and I want to thank them. I want to thank Tom Conway, who I spoke to today, President of the United Steelworkers, for his partnership in arriving at this deal. The deal will immediately remove a point of significant tension with our friends in the European Union. And it rejects the false idea that we cannot grow an economy and support American workers while tackling climate crisis at the same time. We're talking about a lot during the G20, the COP26, but we also know tackling climate crisis has been a all-hands-on-deck effort. American workers are a critical part of the solution. And now I'm happy to take some questions, and I'm told I should start with AP Zeke Miller. Zeke, you have a question? Didn't recognize you with the mask on. I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. President. Here in Rome, you've tried to showcase that America is back, but back at home, your poll numbers have fallen. Your party's nominee for governor in Virginia is facing a very tougher than expected race. Your party spent months trying to negotiate the centerpiece of your domestic legislative agenda. So we're 1 year now since your election. And you've done a lot in your year in office to try to turn the page on the last administration, but we've seen how presidents can turn the page very quickly from one to the other. So why should the world, believe that when you say America's back, that really it's here to stay?
Because the way they reacted, you were here. They listened. Everyone sought me out. They wanted to know what our views were, and we helped lead what happened here. It's just very simple. You know, if you're honest, no, you are honest. That doesn't mean to imply you weren't, but that we got significant support here. Significant support. The United States of America is the most critical part of this entire agenda, and we did it. And by the way, look, the polls are going to go up and down and up and down. They were high early, then they got medium, then went back up, and now they're low. Well, look, this is look at every other president. The same thing has happened, but that's not why I ran. I didn't run to determine how well I'm going to do in the polls. I ran to make sure that I followed through on what I said I would do as President of the United States. And I said that I would make sure that we were in a position where we dealt with climate change, where we moved in a direction that was significantly improved the prospects of American workers being to have good jobs and good pay. And further, that I would make sure that we dealt with the crisis that was caused by COVID. We've done all of those. We continue to do them, and we'll see what happens. But I'm not running because of the polls. Next question was from Jeff Mason, for Jeff Mason of Reuters.
Thank you, Mr. President. A question on climate and energy. Can the world and others be confident that you will be able to follow or make good on the promises on climate change that you have made when you're at Glasgow without a vote having taken place on your bill? And on the same topic, climate, some NGOs are already saying that the G20 commitments today were underwhelming. How do you respond to their criticism that the G20 response is not a good sign for COP26?
I'll answer both questions. Number one, I believe we will pass my Build Back Better plan, and I believe we will pass the infrastructure bill. Combined, they have $900 billion in climate resistance and dealing with climate and resilience, and it's the largest investment in the history of the world that's ever occurred, and it's going to pass, in my view. But we'll see. We'll see. You've all believed it wouldn't happen from the very beginning, the moment I announced it, and you always seem amazed when it's alive again. Well, you may turn out to be right. Maybe it won't work, but I believe we'll see by the end of next week at home that it's passed. With regard to and by the way, the infrastructure bill delivers an awful lot of things in terms of everything from tax credits for electric vehicles to making sure we are able to invest literally billions of dollars in everything from highways, roads, bridges, public transit, airports, etc. But we'll see. And with regard to the disappointment relates to the fact that Russia and including not only Russia but China basically didn't show up in terms of any commitments to deal with climate change. And there's a reason why people should be disappointed in that. I found it disappointing myself. But what we did do, we passed a number of things here to end the subsidization of coal. We made commitments here from across the board, all of us, in terms of what we're going to bring to the G26. And I think, As that old trite saying goes, the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. I think you're going to see we've made significant progress, and more has to be done. But it's going to require us to continue to focus on what China's not doing, what Russia's not doing, and what Saudi Arabia is not doing.
One follow-up on energy, sir. You also met with energy consumers about supply. What steps are you considering taking if OPEC Plus does not raise supply? And do you see any irony in pushing them to increase oil production at the same time that you're going to COP26 to urge people to lower emissions?
Well, on the surface, it seems like an irony, but the truth of the matter is, you've all known, everyone knows, that the idea we're going to be able to move to renewable energy overnight and not have, from this moment on, not use oil or not use gas or not use hydrogen is just not rational. Certain things we can wipe out and we don't have to do. We should be moving immediately to get rid of, as they've adopted here, my proposal to end methane, to deal with a whole range of things. But it does on the surface seem inconsistent. But it's not at all inconsistent in that no one has anticipated that this year we'd be in a position, or even next year, that we're not going to use any more oil or gas, that we're not going to be engaged in any fossil fuels. We're going to stop subsidizing those fossil fuels. We're going to make significant changes. And it just makes the argument that we should move more rapidly to renewable energy, to wind and solar and other means of energy. But the idea that we're going to end and somehow, but it does on the surface, I admit to you. We're going to COP to deal with renewable energy, and I'm saying, why are you guys cutting off oil and raising the price just to make it look harder for us? But it's a legitimate question. I think, though, that if anybody thinks about it, no one ever thought that tomorrow, for example, it's going to take us between now and 2030 to have half the vehicles in America electric vehicles. So the idea we're not going to need gasoline for automobiles is just not realistic. But we will get to the point that by 2050 we have zero emissions. Jim Tankersley, New York Times.
Thank you so much. I'd like to actually start by following up on Jeff's question and then ask you about supply chains as a follow-up to that. But on the question of oil prices, economists say that when you raise the price of something, people will consume less of it. So why not allow even middle-class people around the world to pay more for gasoline in the hope that they would consume fewer fossil fuels and emit less?
Well, because they have to get to their work. They have to get in an automobile, turn on the key, get their kids to school. The school buses have to run. That's the reason why. You know that, Jim. That's the reason. The idea that there's an alternative to walk away from being able to get in your automobile is just not realistic. It's not going to happen. And this wasn't intended to happen. And by the way, when the cost of a gallon of gasoline gets to above $3.35 a gallon, it has profound impact on working class families just to get back and forth to work. So I don't see anything inconsistent with that, but I do think that the idea that Russia and Saudi Arabia and other major producers are not going to pump more oil so people can have gasoline to get to and from work, for example, is not right. But and what we're considering doing with that, I'm reluctant to say before I have to do it.
On supply chain, sir. One of the obviously big problems in the United States for supply chains is not having enough workers, not enough people to drive trucks to unload at ports, for example. A lot of other parts in the supply chain. Workers have not returned to the labor force in America as fast as your administration thought they would. Why do you think that is? Why aren't people
Because they're able
to
negotiate for higher wages and they move from one job to another. That's one of the reasons why. A lot of people don't want to continue to do the job they did before, making $7, $8, $9 an hour. An awful lot of the truck drivers are not unionized truck drivers. They're working like hell and not getting paid a whole lot. And so what you're seeing here is a combination of